You got me really excited. Hello.
Hi. I got you excited.
Yeah, you're doing a countdown. It turned out to be a false alarm. Hello, everybody.
Oh, I was trying before we went live. I was thinking I was going to do like a very official countdown just to be funny. But anyway, I was telling them that I pulled a card, but we didn't read it yet. So I think we should just start with a card to ease into today. And then we'll talk to you guys a little bit about why this topic, some things that sparked it in us. But Saraswati, the goddess of self-knowledge, the essence of who I am, flows effortlessly into everything I create. Kind of loving that, right?
I love that a lot.
So if you guys are watching right now or listening to this, then I would assume that there's a message in here for you as well. I kind of feel like I'm like on my tarot things now. Get me just trying to incorporate it. Okay, so when your soul selects her card, it says, when we are aligned with the essence of who we are, then what needs to be communicated through us, whether with words or music or artwork, can flow. When our creativity feels blocked or stagnant, it isn't because the waters have dried up. We might fear this. But the truth is that self-awareness is the key to unlocking our creative flow. When we take the time to return to the essence of who we really are and nurture that essence, we realign again with the river of expression that the soul generates. Saraswati is the reminder that anything we create that purifies us in the process of making it is a blessing. Our art should be judged not on popularity, but on its power to transform us. Saraswati is a call to return to the essence of our true self. The energy of her card is a charge for more self-knowledge, the more awareness of our own unique soul and what our needs are in this moment. She leads us back into that finely attuned space where we can express with ease and grace what the soul desires most to share. And that energy feels like a river moving through us. It heals, it liberates, and it inspires others to return to their own essence as well. That's like really perfect for tonight, don't you think? Like,
Yeah,
I feel like that's a lot of like what we're really wanting to bring with this topic, wouldn't you say?
Well, I was selfishly thinking about our conversation last night and about just like how great it is to have this little project, seemingly to resonate with certain people and to be able to talk about big topics like this that like really have been on our hearts and our friendship, and to be able to have a safe place to talk about this and how it seemingly resonates with a few people out there and how beautiful that is, and really stepping into who you and I were brought here to be. So I love that. I love that a lot. Thank you for that.
So I know that the thing that really led us to this topic, which honestly, like, I feel like we talked about this topic like as one of our first ones, but I feel like we like had to build up a little bit of like courage within ourselves to go there, and like a little bit of I think it's just a really big thing, and I think that we really like approached it with some reverence, because I feel like for a while it kept just kind of like being on the back burner. I think at one time we had like planned it and we're like, no, not yet. Let's push that off. There was something that I had seen as I was scrolling through TikTok, to be honest, and I sent James the video, and in the video it was saying like, isn't it so interesting how every single woman we know has been raped or assaulted, yet none of us seem to know like any men that are rapists or assaulters. And there was something like in how that was said, and I was just, I said it to James, and I was like, every single woman we do know has been raped or assaulted, right? And you're like, yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what else?
And what else? Well, I think this harkens back to way earlier in our friendship, when you and I were first getting close, and you shared with me like the story that I think you're gonna share tonight. But real quick, me and my facts. I did, because I was getting pumped for this, and I did write down some statistics about this. So
I'm kind of growing to love this about you bringing this to the table. You're like, it's like your role here.
So this is from the Bureau of Justice. 81% of all women in America will be sexually assaulted at some point in their lifetime. 63% of all sexual assault cases are not reported. Every 92 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. 1 in 4 women are sexually assaulted in their lifetime. And then this goes for the LGBTQ plus, it goes on and on, category. Half of all transgender and bisexual women would be sexually assaulted. And 40% of all gay men have experienced sexual violence or sexual assault. So that's where we stand factually. And even going back to our early friendship, the stuff that you're about to share, like it was, there's so much shame that goes along with this. And there's so much, shut the fuck up about it. Don't talk about it. There's a lot of like, you got to be lying about it. I've worked with a lot of people in recovery where, the family will cast out the person that brings to light the truth rather than the person that does the assaulting. And when you're going down a spiritual path, this is a huge, huge thing that can be a roadblock. Or if you let it, it's not something you should ever be like, I'm so glad this happened to me, but it can really be a place of empowerment. It can be a place of solidarity with other men and women that have gone through the same experience. And I really am hoping that we can have some conversations to remove that shame that so many women that we love and care about and men carry with them, and let them know it's okay to speak up. It's okay to tell your story. Someone else might need to hear that story and get to somewhere real about that. And, the other side of it, like be able to own your sexuality again. Because, the things I'm going to share tonight, like I know that it took some of my sexual fire out of me for a long time. It made me feel like sex was dirty or frightening. And that's not the life experience we're brought here to have. So I'm hoping we can dive into those things. And, I know that you did share a lot of your story in a previous video that like really blew me away because you made it during the time that you and I kind of were on our separate journeys.
Well, before we go there, like, I feel like there's a few things that I wanted to add that like, of why I think this is important, of like why I chose like a few years ago to actually start talking about it. When as before, like, I didn't touch it. Like I didn't even tell my husband, my mom, like I just wouldn't touch it, And so right now it feels very important because there's such an opportunity like to kind of transform and kind of step into the reason that we came here to, what we came here to do, who we came here to be. And so if you think about it, like things that are hidden away, things that we choose to, carry around with shame, they stay in the darkness, right? They have this power over us. And really when we choose to like use our voice, right? And to share things and bring it into the light, it really does alchemize it. It really does heal and transform to shed light on something that as in your words, like are shrouded with like shame and it's unspeakable and we can't talk about it. And so I found personally that the more that I've shared my story, that it brings more and more light to my own journey and my own trauma, and it transforms me and it transforms other people. It makes it easy for the next person to bring light to their trauma and to be like, well, if she's saying it, then maybe it's not about me. Maybe there isn't so much shame here. So that is really important. I think that there's a definitely an aspect to the story. And like when I first started sharing it with people of something that ended up being very hurtful by my family member that was not meant to be hurtful, or even like at the time of the things that kept me quiet of when I tried to speak about it to friends and kind of share discomfort, like of why I never reported, right, my assault or my rape, really, right? And why, because some of the things that we're afraid are going to happen, sometimes it does happen because the other person doesn't receive it very well. And I totally believe that people are always doing the best that they can. And I think that even if you are not somebody that has experienced a sexual trauma, I do think that it's important to know, how do I hold a space for that person of knowing that this is really fucking hard for them to share and not put them more into shame? Like, that's really important to me today.
I love that you say that. And I think that where we as humans get it really wrong is we feel that we have to have an answer back to someone sharing their truth. and we
Yeah.
have to find something to say to try to solve that discomfort or that uncomfortable
Absolutely.
feeling. And that's not the truth. You don't always need to say something comforting. Sometimes a person needs to be heard. And I do want to say real quick before we dive into this, on the recovery aspect of this, us as alcoholics and addicts, our disease like loves this shit, loves these pains and these trials and these traumas and these tribulations that are left undealt with, and people telling us to just like stop talking about it or not believe it. Our addiction thrives off of that, and so does so many mental disorders, and it really feeds one another in this really vicious circle. And I think that if we as a society and as a group and as people in the spiritual community can help each other openly heal with this, we'd see a larger decrease in the out of control addiction that is going on right now. Because I know that for years, suffering in silence and keeping some of the stuff that we'll talk about today, my alcoholism loved it. It was absolutely like awesome. Like it had something to feed off of. So I really hope that we get to a space where people can share their story. It's not taboo. People aren't told to shut up. People aren't made to feel like they can't share their pain, because pain needs to be shared so it can be healed. Mm-hmm. So I'm I don't want to say I'm excited about tonight, but it took us a while to get here, and I think it's about time that we start having these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that being said, my dear loved one, do you care to share a little bit about your personal experience? I know that we agreed beforehand that we're not going to go too much into our war stories. We're going to go more to the healing aspect. Do you want to touch lightly on what you carried with you for a long time?
Yeah. And I didn't talk about it until like, honestly, like everything was like coming around with like Me Too. And like, there's topics like that. Just like with Black Lives Matter, it's like everyone thinks they have to like choose a side around it. And so there was a lot of people that, mostly men, some women, that became kind of very, polarized by it. And so there was a lot of conversations happening around certain things, like particularly like the thing with like the Aziz Ansari and sort of like things that were kind of like in a gray area. And so I started being very triggered by these conversations because I had like unprocessed sexual trauma. And so I just felt this like kind of anger rising in me. And then what was like really huge is because you know how much I value like showing up as myself fully, right? Mm-hmm. Putting it all out there and just being vulnerable. And even when it's uncomfortable. So I kept seeing all of these people posting like Me Too and sharing their stories, and I couldn't do it. Like I could not do it because I'm like, I haven't told my mom. I haven't told my husband. Like, how am I supposed to post my story on social media? Like, there's no way I can let my husband find out about it. And so I was just like, wow, like this really feels like this is like a part of my story in a time where I am sort of being asked to kind of step forward in vulnerability, but like I haven't healed that yet. And so it wasn't until all of that a few years ago that I even spoke about it and shared it. And so I'll give you kind of, I guess, the short kind of background of it. I didn't even realize that a date rape when I was in college, I was like 21, 22 years old, like was like actually rape, was sexual assault. And it wasn't until I was like on some kind of task force in college, like learning about assault, that I really started to realize what was happening and kind of put these different pieces together. I am somebody that has minimized things and buried things a lot. Even when I started to talk about my story, I needed James to point out to me that, like, because I would say things like, well, you know, other people are like very violently raped. And I was like on a date with this person and I felt like which I honestly think I was drugged, but I was like, I feel like who am I to really like call it that when there's like on the scale of rape, this one felt like maybe it could have been worse. And James really had to call me on that, right? Like, do you remember sort of calling me out on it?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of a coping mechanism for us in a lot of ways. Like, it wasn't this bad, so I'm okay, and I don't need to broadcast this. And people have had it worse. People get beat, and but it's rape is rape, and I'm really proud that you started to own it, even though it took baby steps to get there. But I don't want to interrupt the trajectory of the story.
Yeah, essentially, like it wasn't until I processed it later that I even realized that there was that I'm like, wait, like I was kind of conscious, but I remember I couldn't speak, like I couldn't talk, and I was trying to say no. And then I started to think about it and think about, wow, in all the time, even in, you know, all of my partying days and in college, or when you and I kind of used to, you know, run around Long Beach and gay bars together. I'm like, never in those moments. Like there were some times I was very drunk. There's never another moment I could think of where I couldn't fucking talk, you know? And it was very kind of, I think, like a wake up call. I remember doing a Google search and trying to see, wow, does that match up that like sometimes you can like be, you know, roofied and like still like maybe not fully lose consciousness. And like it all started to kind of really come bigger picture. And then I think like the biggest kind of piece of it it's like, it's one of those things that it's hard for me to look at now and think, why didn't I report? Because there, with knowledge coming up of like realizing the timeline of like another sorority sister of mine, for example, being raped and being drugged, and like realizing it was happening in the same year, like all of a sudden all this guilt, like I remember messaging her because I felt like it was my fault because I wasn't strong enough to say something at that time, that like like I was very hard on myself. But I'll say that there's like a memory, because this was in the days of MySpace, where before like the Tinders and the dating apps and the Facebooks, like where a lot of people kind of, it was like kind of a dating scene on MySpace. And I remember receiving a message from this guy on here. And honestly, I don't even remember. I probably have blocked that out. Telling me that I shouldn't say something to other people, that I probably shouldn't tell people because people would think that I was a slut. So I should probably not mention it to any of my friends, because he was able to drive home. I couldn't talk, right? But meanwhile, this person was able to leave and drive themselves home. So it's like when I had this different view of it, because of who I am now, and I'm able to have a different perspective on it, it's like so blatantly obvious that that is like the exact definition of date rape. But at the time, I blamed it on me. It was all my fault. So that's like very much, I think, like the condensed version of it.
I want to say something real quick about the slut card. With the sexual assault and the slut card. How fucking dare anybody, with any men, women, your parents, because let me tell you, to touch briefly on some of my sexual assault journey, a family friend had sex with me continuously from when I was 15 through 16, continuously over and over again. This man was in his late 40s, early 50s, would drug me, get me drunk, and have sex with me continuously, and was a known pedophile, had gone to jail for it. Very wealthy, so he got away with it. And by the time I could get my own bearings to discuss and talk about this, I was very sexually active. I was, already heavily in my alcoholism. And that's the card people pulled on me right away to shut me the fuck up. Well, you're a slut anyways. Oh, come on now. You probably liked it. Oh, it couldn't have been that big. How many men have you slept with afterwards? And us as a society, we need to stop doing that to men and women that have been sexually assaulted. It is absolutely disgusting. It has no bearing. And I think that it kept you kind of, frozen for a while, right? You're going to be called a slut. You probably have to, yeah.
I wanted to be a good girl so bad because that's our only choice. Like we really are sold that we are either a slut or we're the good girl. And I clung to that. I was like, what will people think of me if they knew this? What story would they make up about it?
So I want to ask you, like, after coming clean with it, you did make a video about it, right? Correct?
Mm-hmm. And it was a video actually about forgiveness. And it was that I needed to release anything that I was holding, towards that individual, because for myself, not that I, was in any way, because I feel like forgiveness is really misunderstood. And I know we've done a separate episode about that, but for myself, like I could not be sort of obsessing over these things or kind of thinking about it, that I just needed to like fully be in a state of forgiveness and sort of move away from it, kind of really release that energetic attachment to it. And so, that was a very interesting, I guess, first video to make about it. But
so where I kind of want to go with this, because I know Crystal's going to be joining us in a bit, like, how do you feel it has hung over, or how have you worked through it affecting your sexuality, your spiritual well-being? How were you able to really process it, or have you fully processed it, or does it still kind of cling to you when it comes to sex and body image? Is it something that lingers, or have you been really able to work through that veil yet?
I feel like it's entering into its next wave of things, and I'm starting to notice, because I do think that everything does work in cycles, that a lot of the things that I was working through 2 years ago, I was doing a lot of inner child work 2 years ago. Fast forward to now, me working with a therapist around inner child, and then things first kind of speaking of the sexual trauma, and then it coming up again. And it's sort of like, I think we've reached, like, just like that card that we pulled for it, we reached a new level of self-awareness with it, and we have a slightly different perspective of it. And so I think that we're able to perceive different energies or notice different places that it might be impacting us, and then heal it in whatever way is resonating at that time. I will say that because I wouldn't kind of touch it or talk about it in my early 20s, I did go back a few years ago and read the book, The Body Keeps Score, because I personally, as a coach, was like really interested in being like trauma informed. And I knew that like some of my clients, like, even though they didn't come to talk to me about that, they had this level of trust. So then it came out, during a session. And I think that I realized in that book that a lot of the ways that are used to release trauma that are more, I guess, non-traditional methods, that I was doing, because I was a theater major in college. And so theater actually allows you to release a lot of emotions because it feels safe when you're not you. So if I was like in my Shakespearean acting class and acting out these dramatic scenes of like anger or desperation or sadness, like I didn't realize that, but like it was actually helping me, I think, in many ways, like process these emotions and release them. And so it has always made me think about, if like nothing happens like accidentally. So it's almost like it makes me wonder if that was sort of the thing that I was given, right, as my tool to not be like completely crushed by it. 2 years ago. So we're talking about things that we have used for healing. Yeah.
Well, yeah. How can we start to process? I mean, for me, there's a long lineage of sexual atrocities, and not to be a victim, because I'm not a victim of any of it, but I think that growing up in a drug-induced environment as a child, I was exposed to a lot. So there's a lot of atrocities that went on that at a certain point in my adult life, I had to reclaim my sexuality, or I was going to always think of sexuality as something gross, disgusting, harmful, a weapon to hurt. So how do we get back to that place of pleasure? How do we get back to that place of sex feeling good? And so you're starting to tap on it. Like one of the things that really helps me, it was someone in the program had recommended this to me when I was really good, working through all the resentments I had. And I had written a name for each of the men that had sexually violated me on a glass bottle. And I took those bottles and I really looked at it, and I concentrated all the energy and all the frustration, all the anger and all the shame. And I really just put all my anger and rage into it. I was like, fuck you. And I threw each bottle against the wall. And it's symbolic, but it's also a way of releasing it and not letting that person have claim over you anymore. Because that's what I really got to learn as I was healing, that like that man abused me that year, but I let him continue to abuse me on and on and onwards. And it sounds like that boy, we're not calling him a man, that boy that did what he did to you, he was able to abuse you for continuous years because you weren't able to release it.
To release it. Yeah. And one of the things that I came to more recently, because now that I'm working with the divine feminine energies more, is like being very interested in like the womb chakra and like the womb clearings and activations, because so many women are holding a lot of their trauma there, a lot of the sexual trauma, or even a lot of energies from past relationships. And so it's something that I realized that I want to start bringing like to myself first, so that I can learn it and then like actually bring that to the women that I'm working with, because I just feel like it's a really big part of them stepping into like their full creativity, their full like creatrix power, their full like light worker healer power. And so that's something that I feel like is a different thing. I totally would have I'm like really enjoying therapy right now. And I feel like I had never experienced therapy before more recently, only coaching. And so now that I am in the therapy journey and I'm experiencing that, like, I think that that's like, if you find the right therapist, like a great path for it. Like it feels safe and they like see things that you don't. And it's like honestly something that if that's the path that people are drawn to, like, I think that is really great as well. And I probably will go more into sexual trauma with her as we kind of like continue to, unravel our journey.
Well, as your best friend, it's been so interesting watching you get there. Because I mean, like, to get to the point where you can accept therapy, and I hope anyone that's listening that is in huge amounts of pain, grab every tool that semi resonates to you. If therapy semi sounds like something that you should do, get to therapy. Don't let the stigma like linger over you. Like this womb therapy, like I can tell from the comments, like people are like kind of lit up about it. Like go for it. I'm so proud of you for getting to the place of therapy. I wish you would have done it sooner, but it has to happen in divine timing. So it's been really interesting to watch you elevate to get there. But I think anyone that's carrying that overwhelming sense of pain, that they can't function correctly, or they are in the thralls of addiction, you got to do something to really fight back and reclaim these pieces of you.
So I think Crystal's joining us at 5:30, and I think that she's going to really be able to touch on a lot of really good things. I will say that like, one of the things that was really hard when I started to share my story is like the reason that I told my mom, for example, was because I have a sister that's currently in college. And so all of a sudden the Me Too came up, and then I had all of this fear for my sister, who was like the same age that I was, right? Or she's almost the same age that I was. And it became bigger than me. And I was just like, holy shit. Like I wasn't strong enough to say anything back then, but like, I feel like I need to tell her like how this went down and how these things happen in these very subtle ways. And then you end up there because everyone seems to feel like if they don't know a person, like personally, that it's almost like at that age, we're very invincible. We think that nothing can harm us. And so I shared it with my mom, and I know that my mom loves me so much and holds the best intentions. So I will preface it with that, because I believe that she probably just didn't know what to say. But the first thing that came out of her mouth was like, oh, well, Lauren, she's like not like that, almost like she's not going on dates, or she's not doing this. So like Lauren is like, not in any situation. Like, so basically that my sister is not like that. And how I took it, I was like, which that makes me what? And I pushed back and I said, look, I know what you're doing because I have read a lot of Brene Brown, and I'm like, this is called like insulation, right? And I'm like, it's very hard for you to take this in. And I'm sure there's so much fear coming up for you right now about Lauren. So I know this isn't about me, right? But I'm like, it does hurt my feelings because it makes you, right? It's implying that if Lauren is not like that, then I was some other way. So I was like, let me just refresh your memory about who I was at that age. I was the girl that wouldn't like have sex with anyone if I wasn't in a like monogamous relationship with them. I was the good girl. I was the person that like, you know, would only like, you know, be very, very careful. I wanted to be perceived this certain way. I was exactly like Lauren. And I know that that's hard for her to take in, but like, I'm glad that I had read that fucking Brene Brown, you know, because it really helped me in that moment to know this is not about me. But that was really hard. Like, it was really hard to hear that, like, you know, unconsciously, my mom had kind of made me feel bad, right? Like as if it was somehow my fault and that we didn't have to worry about her. And so I just want to name that. I want to tell that story if anybody ever has somebody or their own child come to them, that there's some certain things to think about, or maybe not say, really, just to honor that person and their courage it took them to even say that to you.
Again, I think it does harken back to that we don't have to say something back every time a conversation feels heavy or too much.
Let's give some options like of things that we might say, because I know that that's hard sometimes, right?
I mean, well, and then I do want to point out that it doesn't matter what kind of person a girl or a woman or even a gay boy is, like, no one is asking for it unless they're like truly like asking for it. You know what I mean? Like this whole conception that like, if you behave this way, you won't get raped. If you don't put yourself in these situations, you won't get raped. A, it's a crock of shit, and time and history has proven that. And B, even if a girl is quote unquote slutty seeming, she doesn't deserve to get raped. Even if a girl seems promiscuous or has been promiscuous in the past, no one deserves to get. It's not a fucking an open invitation to rape someone because they're sexually active. And I refuse to carry that weight with my future sexual life, that, you know, some of my indiscretions mean that I can't have the sex life that I want to have, or that I deserve some of that trauma, that I had it coming to me. I refuse to carry that weight. And I think that that's something that if you want to talk about things not to say, those are some of the things not to say. And I think that,
I'm wondering, like, sorry to interrupt, if Solange, because I want to make sure Crystal has our current link. Solange, if you wouldn't mind just like making sure Crystal, if you could find her on that Facebook thread. Sorry to interrupt. But like, because I know that Crystal is going to have just some like amazing wisdom here. And if any of you guys are listening, because I feel like so many people I see, like Lamont and Stacy right now, who are commenting, I feel like you both and probably other people that are watching this or watch this later are very in tune and probably have some things to say that would help people, like, because again, you don't have to solve the problem, and it's definitely not good to make it about you in that moment. I think that those are really good rules of thumb. So please, like, drop anything in the comments that you think might be helpful for people. Solange was, Crystal is here. Oh, I'm sorry, Crystal. Like, I'm gonna add you to the stream. I was so like, was she waiting for black screen? I think maybe it was like in the pre-backstage area. It's black screen though for you, Crystal. I'm not sure if it's like.
She's gonna make a dramatic entrance. I feel it.
Oh yeah, I think she will. I think she's fixing her thing. Yeah, I think that there's even like when I've had people that have like some great other tragedy, like separate from trauma, I know that I always feel like a sudden pressure of like, I need the right thing to say. I need to have the right thing to say. And then I think that that keeps me from saying things at times. And so I'll call myself out on times with saying nothing. But I think that it's sometimes okay just to say, I don't know what to say. Like, oh my gosh, like love you so much. Like, I want to create a space. What do you need from me right now? Like, honestly, just ask. I feel like that's probably like one of my best things to actually give the other person. Oh, hello.
Yeah. Sorry, Crystal has arrived. For those of you listening on Spotify, Crystal has landed. I don't know if we have audio with her. Don't have audio yet. We got visual. Now let's work on audio.
Unmuting. Okay, there you are.
There we go. Hello, my love.
Hi.
Sorry, I thought I was in the waiting room, and I just like had, anyway, I'm here. Hi. Really good talk so far, guys. Really good talk.
I just really want you to just I just want to like pull in the wisdom of Crystal and just like listen to her. And because I just know that you have so much to say on this topic. And like when James was talking about like reclaiming like our bodies and pleasure again, I was like, okay, well, let's just save that for Crystal, because that is Crystal right there.
Where is this
floating around somewhere? But let's just kind of jump in there though, since we have a limited time. Any thoughts on that? Where do you want to begin on this conversation?
Yeah, so coming into this, I have like 3 really important things that I want to say that I think would be helpful. That's why I want to bring them. First, I want to say that I'm not a trauma therapist. So that is like a real thing out there that people can resource, and it is an incredible resource. I know trauma therapists. If you want to be connected with them, I know some in Colorado, actually. So I don't know any in California or throughout the rest of the United States, but I have beautiful resources for this. But the reason that I can come here and talk about this is because I've been through my own trauma. And I've been working on it as an observer and like I've been working on it relentlessly, basically, my whole entire life. And also, I have studied how to walk people through these intensive experiences. What they are, basically it all comes down to the thoughts, body sensations, and images that happen during trauma, right? Like it's one of those 3 things or all of them. And that position of like it's happening. I mean, the definition of trauma is like to have an experience, have an emotional reaction, and then it's like a detrimental emotional reaction that carries on, that you can carry on in your neuroses in your system. So I'm able to help people walk through that kind of stuff through something a little bit close to like NLP, neuro-linguistic stuff like that. And then also the sex coaching. But the 3 things that are really important, and it's going to touch on a lot of the things that you guys have already been bringing forward. And actually before that too, I just want to say, like, I'm loving the talk. I'm loving, let me go back. I was like, shit, that's bomb. I want to say something now. Oh my gosh, what was it? Ashley, the piece. Anyway, let it come back. These 2 pieces. I think that, ultimately they're both around like the fact that trauma is like a tool if we let it be. And like it ends up being like this positioning of, if we're doing the work, we can allow the space, if we can dissolve the space that if we can dissolve the trauma that the space is holding. Or is that right? Yeah. If we can dissolve the space that the trauma is holding and fill it with now our new iteration of ourself, because we've processed it, it becomes like the most profound tool and experience. And I feel like I heard both of you bring that. And it was just so, I was just so thankful to witness that in both of you. So thank you for sharing those stories. But the number one thing I really want to bring here tonight is that how important it is to realize that trauma is not, trauma, whether it's non-sexual or is a sexual assault, can still also be a sexual, can affect you sexually.
I'm feeling you on this.
Okay. That's where that if it you think, I mean, what is trauma? To go out into the playground and some kid calls you a name, you hold it in your body, you make a shadow, you put it in your experience, and you hold it like for the rest of your life, and it could take you through, right? This positioning of like, oh, I was sexually assaulted and that was traumatic, it also lives on the other side. I experienced trauma and now it's affecting my life force, because sexuality is life force. We come through sexuality, like we literally show up to the planet through sex. This is how we got here. So it is the force of our life. It is our Kundalini energy, and trauma gets in the body and blocks that Kundalini energy. So as, like I was saying, as people are like, hey, you know, I was sexually assaulted and now it's affecting my life. Well, you can be trauma in life and it affects your sexuality. One example is, you know, and I'm not going to go on a crazy road with this, but, you know, I had my experience, one of my many traumatic experiences, where I came home, my mom was on meth for like 15 years. I came home. She thought my dad stole us. She had ripped the room apart. She like their room, like stabbed the bed and like shredded up all the things. You know, she was out of her mind from her own trauma. This is why she ended up there in the first place. And it was really difficult for me. It was like, obviously I was a kid. I was 9 years old. And my dad says, call the cops. I call the cops. I'm already total mess, having a full-on nervous system breakdown around what's going on with my parents. The cop comes. I'm a mess. And he says out loud, somebody shut her up because she is a wild banshee right now. And I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. It was like this moment that told me, you and your emotional system is too much. You are too much. And so then what happens is I go forward into my whole life feeling like I need to put my emotions away, attracting people that are telling me I'm too much, that are attracting experiences that are justifying that for me, attracting partners that are insensitive to my emotional system, which is insensitive to my also life force and sexuality, because this is my force. I mean, sexuality is our life force. And this is an example of life getting in the way, life trauma getting in the way of our sexuality. So that I feel like it's so big right now, like sexual assault, huge. Yes. Yeah. Duh. Right. But all trauma can affect our sexual experience, which is our force of life. So I really want people to be easy on themselves and just drop in to that and start to notice, like, how is any of the trauma that I've endured affecting me, my sexuality, and my life force? And I know that's a little, you know, wild to say that I mean, it's not to me, but you know, some might think, oh, life force is something else. But I am a believer, if it's not fully what you are, then it is definitely a big part of what you are. So I just really want to start with that. Secondly, I really see trauma as like smoke in the basement of your house. Like you can go through and like clear the fucking house of all the smoke, you know, and just be like, get out of here. Like, oh my God, what's burning? But unless you go down, deep down into the basement and put out the fucking fire, it's not going to go away. So you have to get into the body. You have to ask the body what happened. Just like you were saying, Ashley, you know, I think the body keeps score, right? You have to get into the body. Say, where does this live? Like I said, thoughts, images, and body sensations. Where does this live? How big is it? What color is it? What does it look like? What is it? All the questions that you could ask, identify it, see it, lean into it. Well, we have a visitor.
Yeah, I pulled Tiffany in because I know she was in the background. Oh,
you scared her off,
Tiffany will read
Crystal.
I pulled her in just because I didn't want to like interrupt you, but I didn't want to like ignore her.
Crystal,
And
you're
so-
so fucking cute. We have a visitor. And she's
So
gone.
Tiffany, I'm gonna add you back in because we were telling Tiffany to join us at 5:45, but I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying.
Sorry.
Hi, Tiff.
Hi.
I didn't mean to scare you away.
No, I was chatting her back and then it exited me out. I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, but I'm back. Hi. Thank you for sharing, Crystal. That was really, that made me happy to hear you say all of those things about the sexuality.
Were you gonna share? Well, there was a few other things you were gonna share. I think
the last most important thing is I want to encourage people to get resourced in their trauma. Like, it's so huge. And I feel like that was a big part of when I was sitting there listening, thinking I was actually in the waiting room. I'm like, okay, I can say some things about this. Getting resource. Oh, that was it. Thank you. I'm reminded now. I loved, Ashley, when you were like, I was in theater major and I was using that process. So that's what I love. I love that, like, if we listen to ourselves clearly and intimately and vulnerably enough, that like we can start to kind of tap into this on our own. But there are tools out there, you know, like I said, there are trauma therapists. If your trauma is so intense that it's showing up as shadow in your life, you know, and you're out of your body having episodes, get resourced. It's so huge. And when we clear our trauma, it's wild, because to clear our trauma is like, what is that, you know, what does that do to the whole rest of the world? I mean, we're all just
the whole universe.
Yeah.
The whole universe, when you clear that trauma, the whole fucking universe flows differently. Not just your body, not just this earth, the whole fucking universe vibrates differently. Sorry, I just it got me all over.
That's the reality. That is fully the reality. And that's why I do this work, because I'm really passionate about that. You know, my whole reason of being is to add expansion to the whole entire universe. And
I don't think people realize that enough until they get on their own spiritual path.
Yeah.
Like, you ripple the whole universe. The thinking that you do not matter, your pain does not matter, it is absolute false. It is a science. It is a spiritual theory, but it is also a science. Your vibrations affect this whole universe. So when you clear a trauma, like you're saying, the whole fucking universe vibrates differently. And I think people need to be aware of that.
Especially now.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely
right? Now.
So, I mean, think about, like, just real quick, like this time of like illness and change and, you know, strife. You heal your traumas, you start vibrating this universe differently. And we need it more than ever. So it's real quick. Hello again, Tiffany.
I muted Tiffany because I wasn't sure if you had headphones, Tiffany, because we were getting a little bit of. Oh, it's okay.
Is it okay?
Yes, it gives a little bit of an echo, or even if you just turn down our volume, that might help a little bit.
Tell me how that sounds. Oh, that
testing. Girl, it's fine. We'll be fine with it. We're glad that you're here. I'm glad that you were able to join, because James was saying that you were working and that it worked out that you could join us. So thank you.
Thank you for having me and making space for me. I really appreciate it.
So James, talk about why you had invited Tiffany, because I know that you thought, you're like, oh, she's going to be perfect for this topic.
So real quick. Well, yeah, I thought Tiffany's going to be perfect for a few topics that we've had, but Tiffany is on the road with me. We're trudging the road together. She is absolutely a recovery warrior. She's a devout mother. She's a great example of recovery working, but she's also had her own traumas that she's been really working through and doing the work. And Tiffany, I don't want to steal your story, so why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of background on why you're here today?
Okay, thank you. So this was really big to me because recently, and I'm in my mid-30s, I just learned how to have some very strong boundaries with my dad. And that sexual trauma, the abuse, was inflicted on my sister, who's not his biological daughter, but like I was informed of this when I was 13 years old. And, then I started acting out sexually, which is so incredible that Crystal was talking about that, because I didn't know how to accept that. And I was in denial. And, my mom allowed me to have a relationship with my dad, who wasn't in the picture every day, but, I still went to his house for summers, yada, yada. And my sister had told me, when she informed me, her and my mom, sat me down at the age of 13, and they're like, listen, this is what your dad did, and you need to stop worshiping him and acting like he walks on water. And I'm like, what? Like, that was super confusing for me. I had my own sexual trauma. It happened to me when I was 5 years old, and I didn't open up about it until I was 7. And that was inflicted by a babysitter. However, other circumstances that I was told about growing up was, and this is really powerful, and I'm sorry, just a trigger warning, but my mom her boyfriend was a serial killer, and she didn't know that. He ended up raping and killing these two little girls that were my sister's babysitters, and like still to this day we don't know if anything happened to my sister. And still to this day, I don't know if my own dad did anything to me. And, PTSD causes that blockage where it's going to come whenever it feels like it, whenever the universe says, okay, well, it's your time. You can handle it right now. And that happens to me. It's still, mid-30s. I have flashes, just, things that happen with my dad. And it's not clear. It's not clear yet. I've had other traumas that kind of supersede anything of that element. But however, my point is, I wouldn't have been able to stand up to my dad if it weren't for this movement right now, the Save Our Children movement, because I was saying to myself, he was bullying me. And that's kind of, that narcissistic trait where it could be a partner, it could be a friend, it could be a parent. And for me, it's been my parent my whole life. And it's like instilling that fear in me, like to be scared of him so I can't stand up to him. And supporting this movement and saving our children, especially because I have a little girl, I have a bonus son as well, where it's like I want to protect them from pedophiles or from sexual abuse or anything of that nature. But how can I support my dad? How can I do that and also support this movement? It's contradicting. I can't do that anymore, and I can't allow this man to bully me, and I need to give my sister that space where it's like standing up to him helps empower her. And she has her way of dealing with her trauma, but I think it's held us back in our relationship where she doesn't trust me so much because I haven't been able to fully be there for her because I wasn't able to put up a wall to my dad. And in our program that James and I share, in our recovery road, we're taught, our code is to have love and tolerance and to acknowledge a sick person. And that's what I've been doing. I wanted to acknowledge my dad as a sick man and to have compassion and forgiveness and just be able to listen and what can I do to help and, yada, yada. At the same time, I'm healing because I was a heroin addict. I was a meth addict. I was an everything addict. I'm a sexual addict, like a sexual being. And to be honest, like after I was told about my dad, I had sex with everything. anything, everything, anything moving. And that's what I made a name for myself in this small town. And it wasn't until now where I found my healing journey where it was like, wow, there's a reason behind it. And I had to process it in a therapeutic manner, which I've used many different forms. I went through treatment, EFT, emotional freedom technique with tapping, a life coach. My life coach was one of the biggest releases I've ever had. And that was releasing anger. And I didn't even know I was that angry until I worked with this woman. And it was so incredible to just have that release where it was like, oh my gosh, now I'm taking my power back and I can release that anger, because my anger led me to using heroin. My anger led me to being a crazy person and not knowing how to have healthy tools like being sexual and doing whatever crosses my path. And now on this healing journey, I get to be able to tell, my dad, like, no, you can't treat me like that. In fact, you shouldn't treat any woman like that. And how dare you? And I've never been able to say those words to him. And now I get to protect myself, my power. I get to protect my children, and I get to support this movement. And I don't have to feel like a hypocrite or that I'm, contradicting anything. Alongside of that, like I've tapped into this healing where I work with a natural healer, and all of my resources are here in California. Am I allowed to say my grant sponsor? Am I allowed to talk about that I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous? I don't know if that's okay or not.
That's your own journey, my love. So
okay. So, well, being introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, I have a grant sponsor who is a licensed therapist and who specializes in trauma. And thank God for that, because, the universe, higher power, whatever you want to call it, led me in her path, and without knowing. And I was taught by her and many others, like, how to conquer all the things that hold me down. And it's a lot of sexual experience. And not only that, it's breaking generational curses, because it's not just me, it's my sister, it's my mom. It's not knowing how to not allow the abuse, and then we act out by having sex with all these people, all these things, whatever comes our way, we're just having sex because we're dealing with it that way. We don't know any better. And now my mom is in her 60s and she's just now learning to cope with those traumas. She was also in her path of addiction, my sister as well. And it all stems, for us, for my family, it all stems from sexual abuse. And now we're learning how to take our power back by different forms of therapy and support, because we get to support each other now instead of lashing out and fighting about everything. We get to call each other and say, oh, okay, how can we help each other? And we weren't taught any other way.
I definitely want to put these resources in addition to putting Crystal's info in there, putting resources that Crystal recommends for Colorado, Tiffany for California. I know that there's definitely some therapists in California that I think are amazing. And I think honestly, it's finding the right person that you feel kind of safety and trust with. And that I think that when we open to it, it's sort of like the right person kind of comes into our path. But I definitely will make sure that we have these resources put into our show notes, when this goes on Spotify, because I definitely know that we might actually be opening up things for people where now they're just oh yeah, I have that too. What do I want to do with this now? I want to honor time, James. What are you seeing? You're pointing, James. No.
Well, Solange is already on.
She's putting it in the comments for anybody that is watching right now. Anything, James, as closing thoughts?
Well,
and
just
Tiffany,
real quick, Solange is on
Tiffany
top of
wasn't
it.
talking.
She did. What? No,
Sorry,
I'm saying Solange did break down the resources in our chat.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, we're having our awkward moment right now. But Tiffany, I have to mute you when you're not talking so that it doesn't echo. So I feel like I didn't want Tiffany to think I was silencing her in that moment, but that's why I did it, girl. To honor any kind of like final thoughts, I just wanted to see, Crystal, if there was anything else that you wanted to share. I feel like this is a conversation that we'll probably have again, and maybe have maybe a little bit deeper from some different angles. But Crystal, is there anything else that you wanted to share that you didn't have the chance to?
Sure, thanks. So yeah, get resourced. How can you get resourced? First, your acceptance of what's happened. Thank you for that beautiful share, Tiffany. Thank you all for those really beautiful shares. We need to acknowledge and lean into the fact that we've been through these things, and resource them. How can you resource them? Trauma therapists, coaches. Coaches are profound because it's not just a talking experience. Therapists are also profound because they have their whole, this is their full study. So they know what they're doing, especially trauma therapists. I would like to more guide people towards a trauma therapist in this situation rather than just a talk therapy or like a family therapist or something like that. Seek out, a trauma therapist, or coaches, because coaches are high impact, shorter amount of time. Sex coaches, things of that nature. Self-acceptance. And something I really want to bring shed a little light onto, it is definitely untraditional, but I feel really passionate about it and I really back it up, is the study of processing your trauma or PTSD through psychedelic therapy or MDMA therapy. Which is actually a trigger for me because I come from a place of drugs and being like, that's not the path, but to turn off the amygdala, if you're doing MDMA therapy, to turn off the amygdala and be able to process the shit you've been through and not be scared of it is a huge thing at this point. People are coming home from wars and murder, and they are able to take that PTSD and release it. This is a huge thing, and it's still a study. Mm-hmm. But I want people, this is something that is rising. It's a big movement in this moment right now for all of us to kind of come home to ourselves. And I also want to say in closing that trauma can be a gift. It is actually a calling to come home, to reintegrate, to say this part of me no longer has to live outside of myself. You can be loved, heard, and seen through being resourced. And that's my closing on that.
Thank you, Crystal. I think that James and I have been talking about wanting to have a conversation around plant medicines and how so much of us have been like scared away, like kind of like I've seen what you're talking about and it seems like so interesting and powerful. And I'm just like, wow, like there's like, I think that like, I'd love to, maybe you want to talk to us on that topic as well, because I think that is so interesting. And I'm glad that you brought that up. Tiffany, thank you for sharing your story. I always feel like there's so many great things that our guests are saying that I just want to like talk to them for longer. And what's something that you didn't get to share, Tiffany, that you want to really make sure that you share with everyone that might listen to this or that's watching now?
I guess, one of my biggest thing is to open up to somebody if you're struggling in any area, whether it be addiction, whether it be shame, guilt, anything that feels like it's holding you down and you're acting out in an impulsive manner and you don't know what's going on. I just want to share that you can reach out to me, whatever that might be. If it's any of those things that I said, I gave you my information. Anybody can look me up on social media. I'm open to listening and just being a soundboard for anybody in that area. So that's about it.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. You guys are so awesome. You're really killing it.
I want to give you props as well, because it's like, even though I am in the coaching space and I have experienced sexual assault, I feel like that is such a big topic that it would be hard for me. Like if someone were to bring it up in a session, but it's like, I feel like, wow, to be doing that all the time, or to potentially have things like that coming in all the time. I just feel like you hold like such a powerful space, like, and it takes a lot of courage to be doing the kind of coaching work that you're doing. And so I just like really want to love on you for that, because like, I have a lot of admiration for you and the work that you're doing. And I'm sure like that I can imagine like your journey of like getting there and being able to find that power within yourself to be that guide for other people. So just thank you for being you and existing and doing your work in the world. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too. And truly just a reflection of you, really. That's all that is. You already know that, though.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys. You guys are awesome.
Well, everybody, I hope that everyone got something. I think that everyone will find this that is meant to listen or watch. And I do think that if there's parts of it that bring something up in you, that it really might be that the universe brought you here to kind of surface something, to bring something to the surface that was ready to be healed. So, yeah, I think that that's something to be grateful for. Yeah. All right. James, anything else? Are you laughing?
Thanks.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Aloha.